Dominic Toretto is a gearhead, adrenaline junkie, and family man who would wear his heart on his sleeve if he had any. What he isn't is real. We assembled experts in the fields of law, psychology, and physics to see how close to reality this character comes. This is What's Wrong with Dom Toretto.
My name is Dr. Drea Letamendi, and I'm a clinical psychologist.
I'm Doug Ridley, and I'm a criminal defense attorney.
My name is Dr. Justin Christensen, and I am a research scientist at an aerospace company.
If we know one thing about Dom, it's his steadfast commitment to family, even if they're not in any way related to him.
Salute, mi familia. Salute.
Is that psychologically honest?
Family members do not have to be blood relatives for us to find genuine connection and bonding and care and compassion. We can find family, we can feel family amongst people who are not related to us. And in fact, a lot of people do.
He puts his family first, but crime comes in a close second. From the moment we meet him, he's stealing a truck full of DVD players. And we wondered, come on, DVDs? Is it that big of a deal? It's like a few grand in today's dollars, right?
When they're dealing with theft, they change it based upon the value. Now, the question of when they stole it and what was the value when they stole it versus later is something I've tried to argue. I've gone up to a judge at the bench with receipts from Kohl's saying that, well, maybe before this was $1,000 worth of merchandise, which makes it a more serious crime. It can be a felony. But Kohl's had a 60% off sale last week, Your Honor, and here's the receipt. And now it's only worth $600, so we should be taking a look at this. It doesn't get us very far.
Dom and the family can't seem to stay out of trouble, like when he has to jump off a car to save his recently amnesiac girlfriend Letty from a tank in the Canary Islands. Could any of that really happen from a physics standpoint?
You know, when I looked at that scene, to me, the gap there wasn't tremendous, maybe 3 or 4 cars long. So let's call that 30 or 40 feet. So actually, if you're going 70 miles an hour and you just eject off that bridge, you can actually cover that distance in about a third of a second. So it's not unrealistic to me that he could be ejected off the car after he hits the rail and make it over to the other side to grab her in a short amount of time.
If Dom survives, he certainly won't be happy. But what role does anger appear to play in Dom's psyche?
Anger is often a secondary emotion to a primary one. And the primary emotion is typically in the realm of sadness, loneliness, feeling shame, feeling guilt. Because we feel so vulnerable with those primary emotions, what's easier to show is anger. And for Dom, he is in a culture where you can be extremely angry and show your frustrations that way. You can drive your car off a cliff and I guess into space. You can beat somebody up senselessly. I think for Dom, that is not necessarily a manifestation of his true emotions. It's often the secondary emotion that he's experiencing in order to process and even try to elicit what's deeper inside.
I watched my dad burn to death.
Despite all his rage, at the end of Fast and Furious, he's still just a Dom in a cage. Luckily, his friends break him out on his way to the prison. Dom didn't appear to have planned the escape or know they were coming, so is he even committing a crime there?
I could certainly try to argue that Dom was in fear for his life from his friends that were breaking him out of prison. Since I can hardly say it with a straight face, I don't know that I would be able to say it with a straight face to a judge as well or to a prosecutor. On the other hand, if he could actually articulate for real that he was worried, like one of them put a gun to his head and said, yeah, you are coming with us, then it's a kidnapping. It's not a breakout anymore. It's moving someone against their will by force. Let's say that they broke him out of the bus and everyone kind of went their separate ways. If he was looking to do the right thing in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the jail, in the eyes of his term and all of that, he would have turned himself back in immediately. Which again, I can't say with a straight face because I can't imagine everybody ever doing that.
Dom's between the rock and a hard place at this point in his journey. So was he right to take a deal from Hobbs to do super cool secret agent missions in exchange for a clean slate?
When The Rock makes that kind of a deal, and it's The Rock, so you gotta trust him, of course, but he comes in and says that we'll wipe the slate clean, again, being the lawyer in the room, I would want all I's dotted and T's crossed. So I would want to see that in writing. I would want to make sure that it's approved by everyone up the chain of command. And there are times where that level of assistance on something that critical and that important to national safety or even international safety justifies giving someone that kind of a clearance. But then again, we probably wouldn't hear about that very often because that's something that they would probably keep pretty quiet.
It's official. You're all free.
One thing that's never happened before is the Tarzan rope swing in Fast 9, right? Surely that one isn't physically possible.
You know, again, it's a little hard to say, but as they come to the bottom, as that rope pulls tight, I mean, in general, they're gonna make sort of like an arcing-like motion, but you certainly could imagine that the car maybe bounces a little bit or has some rotation down at the bottom. Does Dom go through the windshield? Probably not at first because it's attached to the front of the car. When that pulls tight, you know, basically he's gonna try and get slung to the back. But after that, you know, it's hard to say. There's probably a lot of tumbling going on as they're, you know, swinging back up to the top of the cliff. And then the other question is, does the rope or the cable hold? So I did some research, and it turns out that the strongest natural fiber ropes come from this Abaca plant out of the Philippines, and that actually can withstand, you know, braking loads up to like 30,000 pounds. So even in principle, I think a natural fiber rope could support that car as it's swinging through the gorge. Now, I don't think that's a brand new natural fiber rope that they've got on that old bridge. So again, does it hold? Probably not, but at least in principle, I think that one's possible.
Well, that was new.
Wow, and he pulls it off. No wonder the guy thinks he's invincible.
The experience of success really can make us overconfident. So the fact that Dom has risked his life so many times, repeatedly over and over again, that may give him a false sense of invincibility. And so he's going to try things that other people aren't going to try. He's going to put his life in danger. He's going to actually feel quite good at being the only one who's going to do something that's so reckless and so risky that he has almost a reputation around that. So it can be an ego thing.
He's certainly the only one who could have pulled off the bank vault heist in Fast 5. But if it really happened, could anyone have pulled a safe that large through Rio with a couple of muscle cars?
The only thing we really have to consider here is that the mass or the weight of the two cars versus the weight of the safe. So in the movie, they quote the safe being 10 tons of top-of-the-line security. So 10 tons is 20,000 pounds. It's pretty easy to look up the weight of those two Chargers. It's about 8,000 pounds. So in this case, the vault just weighs too much. The force of friction between the vault and the ground is just larger than the force of friction the tires can apply for those two Chargers.
But they do say the cars are modified. Is there anything they could do in a Brazilian auto shop to get it strong enough to pull a vault?
Well, so the thing we want to do is we want to get more friction between the tires and the road. And actually, there's a couple things you could try. So one, you could just try and make the cars heavier. And you know, the cost, of course, is that you're going to move a little bit slower. Your acceleration will be less. But the other thing you could do is they do make specialty street racing tires that have coefficients of friction that are about twice as large as your standard street tires. And if you use those, you're actually starting to get into the ballpark where the force of friction on the tires is about the same as you might expect from the vault and the ground. So in that case, you probably could just start dragging that vault, but definitely don't expect to go anywhere quickly.
One thing Dom does do quickly is forgive. From Brian to Shaw to Jacob, he won't go more than a movie without converting his mortal enemies to family members. That's weird, right?
When we see Dom sort of replace and forgive other people in a way that it doesn't seem like he has boundaries, it really makes me wonder how meaningful his attachments actually are. And so on the one hand, it's a level of self-agency and self-awareness that I appreciate about Dom. He finds something good in everybody. He wants to bring them into the family. And that's something that I think is really endearing. But ultimately, I'm not sure what he's trying to build here. Does he just want people around him in order to never feel alone? Is he trying to constantly keep his mind busy and distracted, and even surrounded by people who are likely to sabotage him, just kind of in order to keep his mind off of the wound that he has? He's sort of just not managing his boundaries well, and that's me being kind.
Dom may struggle managing his boundaries, but Earth's atmosphere isn't one of them. How realistic is it when Dom's buddies turn a Pontiac Firebird into a spaceship? What would you actually need to do it?
Probably the best thing you could do is look at what like the space shuttle uses or the ISS uses. And for those, they actually use multiple layers, like 3 to 4 layers of glass. At least the middle layer is usually like an inch thick. So that's kind of at least ballpark what you'd be looking to use. But it doesn't mean if you didn't use that it might not survive the ascent and at least some amount of time in space.
And strapping a rocket to the back won't melt everyone inside?
Probably not the back of the rocket. I mean, usually, when we think about heat, we think about either the heat of reentry, maybe the heat of during ascent, or when you're actually in space and you're looking at the sun side facing of the vehicle. But so I don't think that the heat from the rocket is going to be an issue. You're moving pretty fast, and a lot of that heat is being sort of transferred behind you.
And once it's up in outer space, is the car going to withstand that, I don't know, pressure?
I mean, realistically, a car is more or less a big hunk of metal, right? And we have lots of big hunks of metal orbiting the Earth satellites. So I think it survives fine. And even Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster went up in 2018, I think, and that's still out there, and that's fine. So yeah, I mean, it survives. If you're asking, can it keep humans alive for a substantial amount of time, the answer is probably not.
So you're saying this space car is somehow within the realm of possibility?
It's hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists and engineers, and lots of vetting and lots of money. So, in principle, I think with enough engineering and enough testing, it's possible. Do I think that a small group of people, with how much time on their hands to sort this out, can do that? I mean, I guess I'll let you decide.
Impressive. I know.
No, that's not impressive.
Unreal. I feel like I need a Corona. Speaking of which, why on earth is Dom so into that beer?
Our memories can attach to smell and taste. And so when we smell something that's familiar to us, or eat foods or have drinks that remind us of a person or experience or something in our past, that can be really visceral. And we may not even know that we're making that connection, that emotional connection in our brains. So there may be something to the Corona.